Welcome back. So I'm still with the national bestseller Salvation, Black People in Love by our queen, Bell Hooks. I'll jump in, still in chapter 1. Much of King's focus on love as the fundamental principle that should guide the freedom struggle was directed towards upholding his belief in nonviolence, while he admonished Black people again and again to recognize the importance of loving our enemies, of not hating white people. He did not give as much attention to the issue of self-love and communal love among Black people, which is flawed Christian theology, because Jesus tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So if you're going to teach anything to people and elevate one over the other, self-love should be matched with loving your neighbor. So there was a problem there already with that teaching. One of the most talked about sermons in the collection was titled Loving Your Enemies. King used this sermon to explain and justify his urging Black people to love our enemies. Quote, "While we abhor segregation, we shall love the segregationists. This is the only way to create the beloved community." Yet he also spoke directly to the white majority, stating, quote, "To our most bitter opponents we say, we shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We shall meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will continue to love you. We cannot, in all good conscience, obey your unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. Throw us in jail and we shall still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our community at the midnight hour and beat us and leave us half dead, and we shall still love you. You alone, Martin, you alone." Nothing was said in this collection about loving Blackness. King did not address the issue of how Black people would love the enemy if they did not love themselves. So, I don't think what he described there was love. I think what he described there was enabling people and allowing them to abuse you, and that isn't self-love. So that's why he couldn't address the self-love aspect, because he was selling out self-love to focus on neighbor love to get white people to go along with his stuff, and they still did not go along with it because they murdered him. The emphasis on Black people loving our enemies was the aspect of King's political agenda most criticized by radicals approaching Black liberation from a more militant standpoint. Again and again, Malcolm X warned against this message of nonviolence. In his 1964 speech to Southern Black youth, he told them, "Don't you run around here trying to make friends with somebody who is depriving you of your rights. They're not your friends. No, they're your enemies. I'm not going to let somebody who hates me tell me to love him." On those rare occasions when Malcolm X spoke about love, he addressed the need for Black folks to change how we saw one another, calling attention to internalized racist thinking. Overall, though, he did not have much to say on the subject of love. I don't think he addressed it directly, but he addressed it. Malcolm said things like, "Who taught you to hate yourself?" Malcolm said things like, "The Black woman is the most unloved or unprotected being in the U.S. Malcolm exemplified how to love a Black woman the way he loved Betty. So it's like some people talk a lot about things, but then you don't see them doing it. But I saw him do it. Underlying his attacks and the critiques of other militant Black leaders on King's philosophy of nonviolence was the assumption that love was for the weak and faint of heart. Real men attended to more important matters. Militant Black power leaders who took up the mantle of Black self-determination, folks like Huey Newton, Elaine Brown, and Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, preferred discussions that centered on building healthy self-esteem rather than discussions of love. More and more as black radicalism was divorced from its religious roots, becoming more secular, discussions of love were silenced. Increasingly as black liberation was made synonymous with the creation of strong black patriarchs, love could no longer have a grand place in the movement. Real men were fighters, not lovers. Freedom, militant black leaders told the world, was about the will to power and not the will to love. So I have to agree with her that there's a tendency for especially men to see love as a feminine trait. And I think also it's tying love to religion. It can also be a deficit because love exists outside of religion in terms of we have love in research, we have love research and studies that show that love improves the well-being of people in every aspect. So I think that is some of what I'm trying to do here, to move love away from the religious context and add another layer of love as an objective variable that exists in science. So I agree with her partially, but I also disagree with her about the Black Power movement, meaning, again, like Malcolm, they did not speak about love, but they embodied it. Someone has to love you to build a clinic for you. Someone has to love you to educate you about your liberation. Someone has to love you to make a breakfast program, a free breakfast program for children. Someone has to love you to risk their life to help you learn to protect yourself against police brutality. So, and maybe it's partly because I'm Jamaican, where in my growing up, people didn't talk about I love you that much, but they showed you they loved you by the way they protected you, they provided for you. So I don't know, maybe that's my culture too. The more freedom became synonymous with gaining equal rights within the existing social structure, the less love was a part of this equation. Gaining access to material privilege increasingly became the emphasis of the Black liberation struggle. Economic self-sufficiency was defined as the sole measure of freedom. In this way, Black political leaders who were more aggressive and militant, who advocated violence, actually did not have as radical an agenda as the one King set forth in his writings. Their insistence on violent struggle was not to change the existing social order, but rather to gain power and privilege within the system. Here again, if she's not speaking directly, so I don't know which particular group she's referencing. But yeah, in the Black Panthers, as you can listen to some of the readings, they were using Marx's struggle, Marxism and that struggle, the proletariat against the poor people against the rich people, to simplify. So that class struggle they were talking about, but they wanted to create a new economic system. They were socialists. They did not want to stay in the capitalist system. In several sermons in Strength to Love, King warned against the potential evils of capitalism, calling attention to the danger of loving money more than freedom. Unequivocally, he stated, quote, "I still contend that the love of money is the root of much evil and may cause a man to become a gross materialist," end quote. Of course, King had no idea that Black folks would one day gain access to material wealth by exploiting Blackness in ways similar to those of the dominant culture. Yet in speeches and sermons delivered shortly before he was assassinated, many of them collected in the anthology, A Testament of Hope, he vehemently opposed imperialism, militarism, and capitalism, calling for radical transformation of society. With prophetic insight, King realized that a love ethic was central to any meaningful challenge to domination. In his last works, he was concerned less with teaching Black people to love our enemies than with the threat of moral corruption posed by our embracing of materialistic hedonism, which he believed would create a spiritual crisis for the nation. His vision was prescient. Describing the current plight of black people in prophetic reflections, Cornel West states, quote, "There is increasing class division and differentiation, creating on the one hand a significant middle class, highly anxiety-ridden, insecure, willing to be co-opted and incorporated into the powers that be, concerned with racism to the degree that it poses constraints on social mobility, and on the other, a vast growing black underclass that embodies a kind of walking nihilism of pervasive drug addiction, pervasive homicide, and an exponential rise in suicide. Now, because of deindustrialization, we also have a devastated black industrial working class. We're talking here about tremendous hopelessness. West does not even mention the growing number of black elites, wealthy individuals who have unprecedented access to mass media, who as producers and shapers of culture promote values detrimental to the collective survival of black people. To protest their class interests, to protect their class interests, these individuals often make it seem as though black capitalism is the same as black self-determination. By embracing and projecting liberal individualism as the only way to success, they undermine a vision of collective well-being that necessarily requires sharing skills and resources. She threw it out here. Yes, so there are many things going on here, and some things I just had to get silent on because, we see that where this, if I'm rich, I'm rare, says Kendrick Lamar, saying that isn't quite true, right? This kind of thing where exploiting black people, there's not this collective togetherness. I'm going to get my bag and I'm going to exploit you if necessary to keep my bag, until the stuff hits the fan like it did in 2025 here now, and you realize that at the end of the day, you're still black, and they see us as a collective even if we don't want to be a collective. So yes, this was juicy stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening.